Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Bring Your Data Protection Strategy into the 21st Century with Pure Storage and Commvault. This special webinar event is brought to you in partnership with Pure Storage and Commvault and produced by Actual Tech Media. We've got a great event lined up for you today. We want this to be a really educational event and conversational. We've got two expert speakers who I'll introduce you to here in just a moment. But before we get started, just a little bit of housekeeping information that you need to be aware of for this event. My name is David Davis of Actual Tech Media, and I'm excited to be your moderator for today's webinar. We want you to know on the left-hand side there, we have a handout, special handout selected by today's presenters on how to achieve greater protection against ransomware. So make sure that you download that handout now because it won't be easily available after today's presentation. Also on the left-hand side, right next to where it says handouts, there is a questions box. I'll go ahead and call your attention to that now. If you click on the word questions, that's where you can enter questions about today's topic. We'll be doing a dedicated Q&A session at the end of today's presentation. So get your questions in early and we'll be doing our best to answer all of those questions. And then finally, we have an Amazon $300 gift card that we'll be announcing the winner of at the end of today's presentation. If you're watching this on demand, I'm sorry, the drawing has already occurred. The prize terms and conditions can be found there in the handouts tab. And with that, I'm excited to introduce you to today's expert presenters. On today's event, you'll hear from Mr. David Huskisson, Rapid Restore Solutions Manager at Pure Storage, and Mr. David Langley, Senior Director of Sales Engineering at Commvault. David, thank you so much for being on the webinar today. With that, I'll hand it over to David Huskisson first. Is that correct?
It is. Thank you, David. And good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our joint session. Delighted to be with our Commvault friends here co-presenting and delighted you could all make it. So I guess just before we get into the technology, just a very quick kind of overview of Pure. So you can see some numbers on the screen here. I'm not going to read off the numbers. I think the only thing that we're really proud about at Pure Storage, which I think differentiates us from a lot of our hardware, I guess peers, is really our NPS score. So we take great pride, and it's a massive company focus, keeping our NPS score to be the best in the industry. And this is really around not only the products we build and the support, but also about the business model. So those of you who are Pure Storage customers already, I hope you're gaining some of the benefit from our evergreen storage model. And those of you considering it, I hope you kind of look into it further. But we've been around for a while. We came to market with our Flash Array, which was the first all-flash storage, block storage offering. So a lot of our peers had hybrid offerings at the time, but we were first to market with an all-flash storage. And I feel like with that technology and the evergreen business model, we really disrupted the industry. And then 3 years ago, we came to market with our second product, which we'll talk a little bit about today, is our Flashblade, highly scale out, fast object store. So we've got two big products in the market, closely integrated with Commvault, which you hopefully should see in the next sort of 20, 30 minutes or so. So I'll hand over to the other David, and he can introduce himself.
Thanks so much, David. Yeah, this is David Langley with Commvault. Thank you, everyone, for taking time out today to hear a little bit more about our joint solution. I mean, can you ever have enough Davids on a webinar? I think today we'll find out. So yes, I've been with Commvault for a number of years, and I wanted to just share again a few metrics that at least I think as a prospect, especially, you might be interested in. Commvault's been in the business of data management for a long time, and that's all we do. much like Pure is maniacally focused on developing the best storage solutions for the industry, Commvault is doing very much the same for the data management industry, clocking in at well over 11 exabytes under management. And that's only a partial sample of our customers. Customers can elect to give us metrics on how they're using our software that certainly makes us better at evolving our solution based on their needs. And it's a very interesting technology in that because of the metrics that we get across millions of weekly jobs and, again, exabytes of data both on premise and in the cloud, we can really push the innovation curve and build to what our customers are actually using. Not necessarily what an analyst says or what we think is best, but really how our customers plan on using the software, which has led to nearly 900 active patents and many more in the queue. We really do pride ourselves on owning the market from a innovation perspective, often above all else. And again, you don't have to take my word for it. You can certainly talk to the analysts, whether that be Gartner or Forrester. Gartner is actually just did release their most recent quadrant. We're very excited about the results and would encourage you, if you are a Gartner subscriber, to reach out to them. You have private access, I think, for the next 48 hours before our media teams get their hands on it. So encourage you to learn more about how both Pure and Commvault differentiate in the market according to the experts on that front. But let's really get into the solution itself. And with that, I'll pass it over to Mr. Huskisson.
Thank you, David. So we're going to sort of take you through today our joint solution. And you can see on the slide here that it's really about the life cycle, the life cycle of data. So we'll talk a little bit about the actual protection, the actual protection end of the game. So we'll talk about Commvault's IntelliSnap integration into our flash array product. We'll talk about, how it can give, how we can give you some efficient, how we can have some efficient data services and replication. Then we'll switch gear to the sort of classic sort of data protection piece when we call that rapid restore, and we'll show how tightly integrated we are with Commvault and actually how we're able to leverage some of Commvault's thought leadership around object stores. And then we'll talk about the sort of operation side and some of the use cases, and we'll certainly be touching on a subject that is all near and dear to everybody on this call, which is ransomware mitigation. And David, I don't know if you wanted to add a couple of comments.
Yeah, well, especially the operations side, right? Backup is not just for breakfast anymore. We strongly encourage our customers to use this fantastic data lake that you create through the protection process to avoid issues such as ransomware, but also provide analytics so you can make smarter decisions about your production workloads, as well as gain insight into what's actually across your data, where it is, what's in it. Things like GDPR and CCPA are certainly forcing businesses to be more aware of where their data is and what's actually in it. And we're going to talk a little bit about how you can use Commvault on top of a Pure backend to really get a better feel for what your data is and use it for more production purposes and not simply to recover when the worst were to happen. But more on that to come. Back to you, David.
Thank you. So just to kind of talk about, just want to take a few moments to talk about the partnership we have with Commvault. I mean, it's been a great partnership. I think what I'm really pleased to see from the rapid restore side is the way that Commvault are really being able to push the use of object as a protocol for data protection, because I think they've certainly got some unique features that David will touch on a little bit later. But I think even before we get to the sort of emerging sort of object story that we have with Commvault, what impresses me from a technology level is the deep integration that Commvault have built in their IntelliSnap capability. And we have literally hundreds of customers using IntelliSnap with with Pure Storage Flash Array. And David will touch on some of the technical nuances, but it's a complex. I think where Commvault have done a great job is they've really simplified a very complicated capability. And if you look at other data protection vendors, it's a really complicated thing that I think Commvault, over a number of years, actually, it's not just sort of now. This integration has been the integration we have with Commvault on the IntelliSnap piece, has been around for a long time, circa sort of 5 or 6 years. And I think that's a testament to the way Commvault built that integration. It's certainly the strongest integration I've seen in the industry across a range of applications. So David will speak more to that. And then, once we've got, we've talked about I've alluded to the Flash Array IntelliSnap integration. And then, we then start to talk about a little bit more of the classic kind of data protection operations, where I'm actually backing things up, whether it's a Flash Array generated snapshot, or I'm backing up other snapshots or other land-based clients to a Pure Storage Flashblade. And again, Commvault, really worked very closely with us in being able to leverage some of their advanced S3 capabilities, which really marries up very well with Flashblade. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. And what that's really been able to deliver is a really scalable solution that actually, especially when you look at a use case around ransomware, has really been able to deliver a very simple solution, but also a highly performant one. And if you think about mitigating from a ransomware attack, it's probably one of the only times that you may have to do a full, almost a full restore. So again, we'll get to that later on. And then on the left-hand side of the screen, you can see, this isn't just words. There's a lot of material we've co-authored together. As I say, we've got a lot of joint customers, and that amount of customers is steadily increasing, especially as we tightly integrated Flashblade and Commvault together. So I'm very excited about the partnership. I feel like we're on a real upward. Curve as we both really challenge each other to differentiate the solution we've built together. So I think I'm going to hand over to the other David now, because I think we've got our kind of first poll that we're gonna ask you guys to participate in.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a poll on the screen I want to call everyone's attention to, and that is, do you use storage snapshots in conjunction with your backup product as part of your data protection strategy? And I'll leave this poll up. To answer the poll, you just do it right there in the slides window. Click on the option that corresponds to you and your company. The answers are yes, I love it, or what exactly are you talking about when you talk about storage snapshots and backup? So let's get a few more responses in. I appreciate all the responses that have come in so far. Thank you for those. All right, excellent. Thank you everyone who responded to that. Let me go ahead and share the results with everyone now. And it looks like 79% said yes, love it, they're doing it right now. 20% aren't quite sure exactly what this is. David, what do you think?
Yeah, that's kind of funny, David. Because now we're singulars. I'm kind of surprised, which is fantastic news that so many people are leveraging it. Because as long as the technology has been around, there's still, I find when I'm meeting with customers, even those who've been in the industry for a long time, snapshots are a relatively foreign concept. And unfortunately, early on in this type of technology, the interfaces necessary to configure them were so complicated. I think people tried it and moved away, which is certainly not the case with Pure. But to see so many already adopting it's great to see for me. How about you, David?
Weirdly, and we haven't sort of set this up because we didn't know what the results were going to be, but I can't agree more. I mean, generally, when we've looked at customer polls and surveys on this thing, it's actually normally the other way around, because I think part of the disconnect is you say the word storage snapshot and suddenly everybody thinks that's a storage admin's job and it's a silo and it's too complicated. So I have to say I'm absolutely delighted to see those numbers, and it kind of I think that sort of attests to the solution that we've built together. But I'm hoping we can convince the ones who didn't say we loved it that it's a good thing worth considering.
Absolutely. It's a new day. And now that we've used the term IntelliSnap about 100 times, it's probably worth defining what the heck that means. But IntelliSnap is a Commvault technology that does the orchestration of snapshots and clones inside of the Commvault interface, completely GUI driven. So absolutely no scripting. It's designed to make setup as simple as possible. And whether we're talking about managing snapshots on arrays such as Pure, this also applies to snapshots in the cloud as well. So use a single technology, all GUI driven, so that you don't have to understand all the lingos and languages and APIs of different providers to get those snapshots taken. This allows you to schedule those snapshots so that you can so over the course of the day, you can take recurring snapshots, as well as occasionally even mount those up to a proxy and do backups to other disk targets or cloud targets, or even tape for those of you who love an air gap. So Commvault IntelliSnap, really what we're talking about is the orchestration of snapshots, both on arrays and inside clouds, to speed backups and cut those recovery point objectives way, way down. So pass it over to you, Dave, to talk a little bit more about Flashblade.
Yeah, so, for those of you, are Pure Storage customers, there's a fairly good chance you're probably a FlashArray customer, probably not a Flashblade customer, may not even be aware that we actually have a second product, and that's on us really for not shouting it from the rooftops more loudly. So, FlashArray, as I say, was the product that brought sort of Pure to the public market. But 3 years ago, we started a second product, which we called Flashblade. And Flashblade was designed to serve, a different set of use cases. And we initially designed Flashblade really to serve, and it seems like a long time ago now for things that we sort of take for granted. But, there was a range, if you can remember that far back, there was a bunch of new applications coming to market. I'm thinking of the sort of analytics, artificial intelligence kind of data lake kind of applications. And these were, massively unstructured, massive amounts of data, but really did need some processing power. And you really needed to have it on a storage platform that could scale. And because it's unstructured data, it wasn't really, FlashArray being blocked wasn't really the right storage platform. And also you had the massive growth that we still have today in Amazon's S3 protocol. So you had a sort of almost a perfect storm of things happening. So we went away and sort of ran almost a startup within a startup, and came to market with our Flashblade. And Flashblade, obviously still all flash, that's what Pure Storage is, but it's very, very different from Pure Storage's FlashArray, based on blades, as the name suggests. So rather than just having typical controllers, we based it entirely on blade technology. Each blade has its own storage, has its own networking, and has its compute. So you can easily expand it. We gave it a single namespace. We built all the simplicity that we built and been successful with FlashArray into Flashblade. So Flashblade, scale out, all flash based on blades. Performance increases actually as it gets bigger because you're adding additional processing power and networking, and we abstract all the complexity, especially around the networking. So we really give you, no matter how big your Flashblade becomes, and now we'll go up to 10 petabytes of raw, no matter how big your Flashblade becomes, we preserve a single namespace. And we started talking to, our customers around analytics and artificial intelligence applications and semiconductor design, all applications that required, that massive amount of performance. And, we had, you can always rely on sales teams to go do something you perhaps don't want them to do or you didn't think you wanted to do. And we actually had a couple of our sales teams in New York actually sold some Flashblades for data protection. And I think we were slightly mystified why customers at that time would pay a premium for an all-flash device for data protection. And it really boiled down to one thing. It boiled down to I was not able as a customer to meet my restore targets. Sure, I can get the data off quickly enough, but when it came back to actually bringing it back to actually do things with it, I was just not meeting my restore SLAs. And in fact, as time goes on and I'm backing more stuff up, the worse my restore got. And we actually had some customers just purchase Flashblade 3 years ago, just off the back of the ability to do what we now call rapid restore. And actually, if you look over the last sort of 3 or 4 years in Flashblade's life, our biggest use case today is actually data protection, rapid restore. So, we're very proud about that. It was something we stumbled on. We didn't think customers wanted to buy it, but it shows you that there's a lot of dissatisfaction about being able to meet restore windows. And again, when we get to, especially around ransomware, I think you'll all appreciate how important that rapid restore is. And I guess one kind of final thing is, and this is a message we've preserved to this day, and we always talk to customers about this message. Flashblade is what we call the data hub. So it's not a dedicated storage device for a particular operation. 80% of our customers that use it for what we call rapid restore actually, also use it for another use case. So whether that's a Splunk or Elastic or some special EDA application, we have lots and lots of customers using it for more than one use case. And I think that really speaks to, the power and the sort of design of Flashblade as a technology. So let's sort of zoom in a little bit onto the rapid restore use case. And, David's already talked about IntelliSnap and the ability to integrate very easily without scripts, have everything orchestrated by Commvault. And again, the same is absolutely true of Flashblade. So Flashblade sits behind Commvault as a backup target. And again, we've changed, because we were able, and David will talk about the technical detail in a moment, but because we knew that Commvault had a particularly advanced development of S3 in their product, we were able to leverage Flashblade as an S3 target for Commvault. Traditionally, Flashblade supports SMB, it supports NFS, and it supports S3, and we choose the most efficient protocol for the application. And after some lab work we did in conjunction with Commvault, we actually found that our S3 performance with Commvault was superior to what we saw with NFS, but it also gave us a bunch of advantages that David will talk about in a moment that really helped us, improve a bunch of outcomes for customers using it. So it's a very simple, deployment. And the beauty of the combined solution is, certainly from the Flashblade side, as you scale up, and we all know, anyone who's certainly in the data management world will know, everything works great on day one, but on day 737, am I recovering as quickly? Am I able to expand my platform? Am I future-proof? Do I have to go and buy something else? Do I start creating multiple pools of management? And again, that was one of the design principles we had around Flashblade. I can easily grow Flashblade. I can add blades into the chassis. I can then, link multiple chassis together. And, I can keep my single point of management. I have to do little or no configuration as I grow my Flashblade deployment out. So that covers the sort of Flashblade side. And I'm now going to let one of the other Davids talk about how easy it is on the Commvault side to scale up there.
Thanks, David. And I'm so in love with that last slide. I'm going to go back to it for just a couple of quick use cases I think are super relevant because a lot of companies talk about performance, a lot of companies talk about scale, but it's really when the Commvault technology and Pure work together that some really interesting options come to light. The first of which is you'll notice all of those application logos at the top, such as Epic and SAP, think Oracle and SQL Server. Well, those are all applications that when we take a snapshot of, wouldn't it be great if those applications were aware that we were going to take a snapshot of them so that they were consistent at the point of snapshot? That is something that IntelliSnap will do. It'll actually talk to the application and let that application know that a snapshot is coming so that it is the application is aware, is in that quiesce state so that you can have extreme confidence that the snapshot is going to be consistent and workable if you ever have to rely on it. But I'll go one step further and say, for example, we are taking SQL snapshots every couple hours, and we do have a corruptive or a viral event, half an hour later. Well, one of the really cool things that Commvault on top of Pure can do is as we take these snapshots, we can be taking regular transaction log backups of your critical databases and sending those into the Flashblade. If you chose to recover that database to just before the corruptive event occurred, you can actually tell Commvault, restore to 29 minutes prior to this event or set a particular point in time, and it will automatically roll the flash array back to that point in time, the last known good snapshot, and then replay those transaction logs from the Flashblade back on top of the database. So it's a couple different technologies, snapshots as well as transaction log backups that layer on top of one another to give your DBAs that really granular control of how well applications can come back. And you don't have to know anything about SQL transaction logs or what the flash array command is to call or recall a snapshot. It's all handled in the GUI. You literally click on the database, tell it what point in time to recover to, and it manages the technologies behind to get you to that point in time for an absolute minimal data loss, even when the worst were to happen. The second use case I like to highlight on this slide is the fact that I'm sure we all have some Vmware farms out there, at least one or two. Well, the thing about Vmware farms is they're really, really busy. And sometimes taking a software snapshot of a VMware farm is very challenging to do because it's so busy. But leveraging snapshots on top of the flash array make that very easy to do. Hardware snapshots are natively more efficient than a software snapshot that VMware provides. And IntelliSnap can actually talk to the flash array as well as VMware to make sure that you get that hardware snapshot that allows VMware to continue working, get it out of that backup mode as quickly as possible so that there's less transaction logs to replay on your VM farm. So you get more out of your hardware, more out of your VMware using Commvault on top of Pure. And to go one step further, say we were to lose a machine and we needed to restore that particular machine, we can actually launch that virtual machine from a Flashblade backup on the Flashblade itself. So you're actually running your virtual machine from the backup repository. And while it's running back there, we can actually be doing a vMotion in the background, putting it back onto the flash array. So there's a lot of really cool use cases that come up where Commvault can leverage the outrageous utility and performance and scalability of the Pure platform that go beyond simple data protection. The story just gets better and better as our companies work together to design these really innovative solutions. And as David mentioned before, we can't make it any simpler. You literally right-click inside of the infrastructure management part of our HTML5 interface and say add media agent. And at that point, we can point it at a server that's backed by Flashblade and gain access to that remarkable scale, petabytes of scale of flash storage. So very impressive, very simple to use, can't impress you upon enough. And if you haven't seen the Commvault interface or the Pure interfaces for a while, my first advertisement to reach out to either Commvault or Pure to learn more. But the power and the simplicity of the two solutions working together are truly amazing. And one other thing that we wanted to talk about is a very specific technology called Cloud Accelerator. And Cloud Accelerator was originally designed to allow clients to write directly into hyperscale clouds like GCP and AWS and Azure. And what we've done is we've taken this technology working with Pure, and rather than having a client talk to a Commvault server and then write out to the Flashblade and doing those 2 hops you see there on the left-hand side, with the Cloud Accelerator technology, the clients can write the data directly into the Flashblade and then just sending the job information to the Commvault server. What we found is you'd think that since we only have 1 hop instead of 2, that backup times would be cut in half. In fact, what we're finding in the field is this cuts the backup times down to 1/3 of what they were before. So it's just another fantastic example of how Commvault and Pure working together in the labs, trying to find creative ways to better serve you, our consumers, has really resulted in some cool technologies. And there's no silver bullet here, right? It's just doing things smarter and leveraging one another's capabilities. Now, I'll let David talk about another really exciting technology around concurrency.
Oh, okay. Sorry, sorry, you caught me unawares there. So, yeah, so I think what we were able to do, what we were able to do with Commvault, as we really started a science project in the lab. We just wanted to see, because we're always looking to leverage Flashblade's, S3 capability, because it's well-rounded and it scales and gets performant. And you can see on this slide very briefly, what we were actually able to do. And prior to this, we had a lot of Commvault and Pure deployments, but they were all largely based. They were all based around NFS, and it worked just fine. We got good performance, but there was some complexity. And really, you can see here on the slide what we were able to do. Really, is by switching to S3, what we were able to do was actually leverage. We were actually able to leverage the concurrency that S3 provides us in Flashblade, and so we actually were able to get multiple streams, if you like, underneath Flashblade, actually writing to Flashblade. So we were able to really, cut out that step between the application communicating with the kernel. We were able to do it from the application end. So that just drives our restore and backup performance higher. And what you don't necessarily get to see on this slide is also one of the biggest benefits we leveraged, aside from this concurrency we were able to drive, was really the simplicity from a deployment perspective. Now, in a lab, you don't necessarily see that, right? You've got a couple of NFS mounts and you can just set it up and off you go. But what we were seeing in large customers who were wanting to leverage Commvault and Flashblade together, especially in complicated network environments, you started to get into a lot of complexity and a lot of design complexity around setting up NFS mounts. You've got to look at your network topologies, you have to have several mounts, and it wasn't really great from an application end. And honestly, David did say there's no silver bullet, and there really isn't. But I'm now going to contradict myself by saying what the silver bullet we did see, aside from the performance, was we could just set up a S3 bucket on Flashblade. So it's basically a single S3 bucket. And then we were able to point Commvault to that single S3 bucket. And that was literally all we needed to do. So we actually saw, once we debuted this solution, once we brought it out of the lab and did our due diligence around it, we actually saw a massive amount of customers, existing Commvault and Pure Flashblade customers, actually migrate from NFS to S3, such to a point now where our biggest use case on Flashblade today, from an application perspective, is actually Commvault, Commvault for data protection. So this was actually what turned out to be a science project, just to see whether, what kind of performance we could gain, has actually turned out for both of our companies to be, actually a game changer. Just, just through the additional performance we can drive, leveraging the cloud accelerator technology David's talked about, and also just, making it a lot more simple for administrators. And again, back to the scaling, as my environments grow bigger, you'd have to add other NFS mounts and it gets complicated. We were able to reduce a lot of that complexity by moving towards S3. So I think, David, it's back to you for ransomware.
Absolutely. And the one thing about S3, it's an authenticated connection. For you security guys out there, you can appreciate that anytime we can authenticate a connection from a writer to a target, it gives us one extra layer of security, particularly for events such as ransomware. And unfortunately, ransomware is a very real threat. I believe the analysts were saying about every 11 seconds, another business is impacted by ransomware. And unfortunately, we can certainly validate from our Commvault support desk that a lot of customers are struggling and being attacked by ransomware. So we wanted to talk, spend a few minutes talking about how leveraging a Commvault and Pure solution can help better protect you from ransomware. It's not just about the recovery when our solutions are working together. Inside of Commvault, there's a number of technologies. I'm going to talk about a couple of them here. The first of which is the Honeypot concept. And essentially what a honeypot is, it's a file or folder that is inserted into a file system that is in a known state. And so in the case of Commvault, we insert files into our agents. And if we, for any reason, see those files change in any way, we know that it's not a normal process. And when we see a honeypot being affected or changed or accessed, we can immediately either alert IT to the fact that something that we don't understand is occurring, or we can even go so far as to enact a workflow and take action, whether that's severing connections to the backup repository, severing connections to that server. But our users get to choose the action that we take based on that honeypot file being accessed, which is extremely strong way to detect ransomware activity very early on. The other technology I wanted to talk about was detecting file anomalies. In addition to the honeypots, after about 5 to 7 days of repeated backups, and as the Commvault's AI learns more about how your servers behave on an individual basis, we create a baseline, essentially saying, hey, this server typically grows 1% a day, or its files generally get changed at this rate. Well, whenever we see the behavior go outside of those norms, yet again, we can either throw an alert or enact a workflow to take specific action to, again, either better protect the backups or take action on the client, whatever the customer chooses to do with that kind of activity to prevent ransomware spreading even further. In fact, the CTO of the state of Colorado got on stage in front of 1,500 people and explained when they were attacked by ransomware. And again, we don't profess to be a ransomware detection tool by our nature, but we do have technologies to detect ransomware. It was actually Commvault that detected the attack first. And then, of course, they leveraged our technology to recover the affected data, and they did not pay a ransom. But again, that's just a couple of technologies that Commvault's bringing to the table. But you layer that on top of what Pure is bringing to the table in terms of safe mode snapshots. And a lot of companies out there talk about immutable backups. And certainly Commvault writes immutable backups to all its storage. But Pure certainly takes this to a whole nother layer with safe mode snapshots. But I'll let David talk about that.
Yeah, thanks, David. So briefly, David's talked about the ransomware capabilities inside of Commvault, and I think I've been in the data protection game way too long, but what I've certainly seen in the last sort of 2 or 3 years, especially with that that massive increase in cyber attacks, what I've seen is it's almost like data protection in my mind is going through like a renaissance, because really, if everyone has invested heavily in, defense in depth kind of strategies, putting obstacles in front of an attacker. But, if those obstacles were foolproof, then there'd be no ransomware attacks, and they clearly aren't. So what we've done at Pure is really work with our backup partners to provide that last line of mitigation, because the last thing you want to do is pay the ransom. And even if you pay the ransom, there's a lot of data out there that shows you may not get your data back anyway. And even if you pay the ransom, they may come back for some more. So you kind of get stuck in a cycle. So what we're seeing is customers really now, organizations are really looking at their data protection strategy as the way to get out of paying the ransom. So this is really where we bring the technologies in from Commvault, and then we have our safe mode snapshots. So safe mode snapshots, like every other storage platform out there, we have, read-only snapshots. It's table stakes snapshots have been around, for a very, very long time. The difference is, and you can probably appreciate, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail in a public forum. If you want to come and talk to us in more detail, then we can certainly facilitate that. And there's white papers and material publicly available. But really what we've done with safe mode snapshots is the snapshots aren't particularly any different from anyone else's. They're read only. But what we have done, which has really resonated with customers, is we've effectively detached the security model from regular snapshots with safe mode snapshots. And what I mean by that is, what we know is there's a lot of evidence and data that suggests, if there's a sort of planned ransomware cyber attack, the attacker spends a lot of time snooping around the network, looking for credentials and identifying primary storage systems, but now identifying backup storage systems. And generally what will happen there is they'll try and compromise credentials at a storage layer, try and get in, either encrypt or delete snapshots. And really by having a separate security model for safe mode snapshots, which is all done in conjunction with Pure support, and again, there's no silver bullet, but we actually make it much harder, certainly for credential compromise, with the way we've implemented safe mode snapshots. So it's to an extent where even the administrator of the Flashblade can't actually delete the safe mode snapshots. Many operations around safe mode need to be orchestrated with Pure support, and there's a whole security system that's wrapped around that, making it a lot harder. Clearly not impossible, but making it a lot harder, certainly for credential compromise. And this is a feature we've had in the product for a while, but we tested it thoroughly with our security teams, and we released this feature into the wild probably in December. And even in the short time, 6 or 7 months, we've had a lot of uptake, just because, and it's not a silver bullet for every situation, but what it does is it gives you an extra layer of mitigation, an extra layer of security with your backup product. And again, if I look at some of the technology that David's talked about in Commvault, I certainly see that, Commvault have gone to a lot of lengths to engineer safety and ransomware and cybersecurity proof into their products. I think the combination of the work that Commvault have done with safe mode underneath, never going to promise that you'll be 100% safe, but I think what we've done together really gives you, the best possible chance for mitigation. And remember, the other point that generally gets lost here, and I mentioned it earlier, is if it does come to a recovery from a ransomware event, you're not likely to be recovering just a couple of VMs or 2 or 3 databases. You're going to be recovering pretty much all your critical production IT applications. And that means every minute that you're down is a cost to your organization, not only from revenue, but brand, and it gets into the press. So, people say, well, I don't really need to restore that quickly. I think organizations are starting to look at this concept of rapid restore, and are now starting to think, well, with my backup product and rapid restore and some ransomware mitigation, this is my way out of not paying the ransom. So, don't look at these things in isolation. Look at your backup product, look at the ransomware protection you can get, and look at the ability to restore quickly. So I think, David, we're moving on to a poll.
Absolutely. Yeah. The poll on the screen I want to call everyone's attention to is, do you have a ransomware recovery strategy? And it could be just that you plan to pay the ransom, or you have complete confidence in your data protection strategy to get critical systems up and running within the SLA, no sweat, or none of the above. Not quite sure at this point.
Yeah, and while people are answering here, there's one other bullet on David's last slide where their immutability technology is included at no charge. That is also true for the Commvault ransomware technologies. We're not going to charge you to protect yourself from the most likely cause of data loss. And surprisingly, that's relatively unique in the industry, particularly on the Commvault side and also on the storage side, that a lot of these technologies that we've been talking about are very much included in our base products, where a lot of other players out there are trying to capitalize on your risk. So I just wanted to throw that out there because I think a lot of people have unfortunately spent a lot of money on ransomware technologies that both Commvault and Pure include for free.
Yeah, great point, David. Thank you. So we've got a lot of responses coming into this. Let me share the results. And 0% plan to pay the ransom.
Good for you.
Good. Good.
That's good to see. 45% have complete faith in what they're doing, and 54% have none of the above, or could be not quite sure. What's your take, David?
So I agree with this, particularly after David's introduction in terms of paying the ransom. That's more of a deep hole than a way out. So I completely agree with that. I think this very much aligns with the industry. A lot of people, either they're 100% focused on it and they feel like they've got themselves covered, and others, don't know about it, but don't know quite where to start. And are trying to figure out a game plan. So I think this is very representative of the customers. Nobody plans on paying the ransom. But whether you're 100% or just getting started or figuring things out I think that's very representative of my conversations with the customers that I speak with. What do you think, David?
Yeah, again, that's, we've been talking about ransomware, as I said, seriously with customers for, since sort of November, December last year. And that, I'm obviously delighted to see that no one is paying the ransom. So I'm really pleased about that because, as we've said, it's a sort of rat hole that you can never get yourself out of. And again, it's literally, every conversation we have, even as a storage company, it's the top three CXO concern is, ransomware could kill my business if I can't recover quickly enough. And, again, this pretty much aligns. Some organizations have very confident in their ability to recover, have tested recovery, know they can do it. And then there's, as David said, there's those who are just getting started, and there's so much noise and news about ransomware. It can be quite hard. It can be quite hard to kind of get a start. And the responsibilities, where does it fall? We've got a security team, but I have a storage team. So it's not a simple pursuit. So yeah, those numbers make sense to me.
Outstanding. Well, a couple more talking points here, and then we'll wrap up, folks. I guess the first of which is, all this technology sounds all well and good, but if it's super hard to configure or understand, it just doesn't get used. And that's certainly understandable. And the consumer has absolutely had a voice in making sure that as we develop these technologies, that they are easy to turn on, that they are effective, and they behave the way we expect. And I'll tell you what, particularly integrating Pure with Commvault couldn't be simpler. The screen, it should actually have a line down the middle, because on the left side, you see the two screens it takes to turn on snapshots on a flash array. You literally turn it on. You provide the criteria in the array, and at that point, we can start taking snapshots of the volumes that are presented up there. And then at some point, of course, you define a schedule or a plan rather on how often you want that to happen. So two screenshots to turn it on. So you don't need to understand anything about APIs or CLIs or anything like that to get that technology turned on. And very similarly, in terms of sending data from the Commvault solution into Flashblade, you add the cloud there, that back screen there, by providing the information in terms of the network path to it, as well as your credentials. And then you just give the bucket a name. I don't know how we can make it more simple than that, but that's all it takes. So not only is the technology very powerful, but the simplicity in the interface. Again, if you haven't seen it in a while, I'd encourage y'all to take a demonstration of the new interfaces. It's that simple, folks. All right. And so the last comment I wanted to touch on here before we wrap is around Commvault Activate. Activate's actually a suite of features that can be added into any Commvault environment. But these are the technologies I mentioned very early on in our first or second slide there that talks about leveraging your backup repository sitting on Flashblade for purposes beyond simple recovery. First and most obvious is file storage optimization. What if you could run data analytics, file analytics, user usage analytics against your file systems and data workloads in the backup? It takes that workload off of the front end. And in a lot of cases, we find customers finding 20, 30, 50% of their data is stale or dead or represents more risk than value to their business. And with file storage optimization, you can run very simple to read graphical reports to get a sense of how your users are using your data to determine, should you have more Flashblade, should you have more FlashArray in your environment to get the best use of the value of the data that you already have. The second piece is sensitive data governance, and this is actually a content search capability. So looking inside of files and data structures in your environment and trying to find sensitive data or any kind of data that you might be interested in, whether it's specific to GDPR or whether it's specific to the California Privacy Act. All of these different regulations, whether they're internal to your business or federally mandated, we can look for specific kinds of information, whether it's credit cards or social security numbers or other PII data, so that you know where high-risk data sits. This is not just in the data center too. If we are protecting your O365 mailboxes or protecting your endpoints, we can run the same search against the backup repository, right? Running content search against a Flashblade. Imagine how fast that would run and what kind of insights you would gain if you could look inside the data set and look at its content to make smart business governance decisions. And then finally, compliance and e-discovery. We live in a litigious world, and so as essentially an enhanced interface into sensitive data governance, we can provide your internal legal team or anyone who's tasked with e-discovery to do searches for key terms or look for Langley within 10 words of Commvault, do complex queries to find information associated with specific legal activities. And then those files can be quarantined or deleted or exported to be handed off to third-party counsel. And again, if we can just take half the amount of data you send to third-party counsel, that will make a new Pure and Commvault solution look absolutely free, because we all know how expensive legal fees can get, particularly when you send more data than you have to cover yourself for a particular case. And so all of these three just are a representation of different ways to leverage the amazing speed and capability of the Flashblade with the analytics and intelligence of the Commvault software running on top of that. So I'll turn it over to Dave to have some final closing thoughts here.
Yeah, thank you, David. So hopefully you'll with this, feel some sympathy when people attend these webinars. There's a lot of data and a lot of information, but I'm hopeful that you'll leave today with these really three key messages. We've talked. I've certainly talked a lot about Flashblade and its ability to do rapid restore, and that's really driven a lot of the success we've had with Flashblade. But again, don't just think about day one. Just think about how things perform. Everything performs great on day one, but just think about, what it's going to be like on day 766. And, there's a lot of pure Commvault customers who are getting the same performance as they, 2 years down the line as they were the first day they acquired Flashblade. And to David's point, I'm not entirely, I'd be delighted to hear from this audience, especially when you've got some experience of the solution. I'm not entirely sure how much simpler we could make it. I mean, certainly the S3 configuration on Flashblade is beautifully simple. And again, back to the IntelliSnap and the Snapshot integration we talked about. Again, we've really got into the sort of point and click world. We've abstracted a lot of the complexity, away, both on the Commvault side and on the FlashArray configuration side. And then finally, I'll just reinforce the scale message. It's really important that, you're looking at solutions that will work on day 766, because no one, in my experience, is managing less data, especially in the current environment we've got now. There's more and more data we're managing. There's a big industry in big data. So I'm not seeing any data reduction volumes. And so you need to be choosing solutions that can perform, but also can scale as you inevitably grow. So I think with that, I know we're sort of nearly at the top of the hour. I don't know whether we've got time for some questions.
Absolutely. Yeah, we do have time for just a few questions here. While we do that, I'm going to bring up this poll question for the audience that says, what additional information would you like about the Pure Storage and Commvault solution? And I encourage everyone to answer that. We'll just leave that up again while we do some Q&A. So lots of good questions coming in. First question that I wanted to ask here is, how many customers do you have together, and what types of customers are they?
Great question. I mean, at the last count, it's north of, and David, keep me honest, I think the last number I saw, it's north of 300 customers. What sectors they're in is, I don't think there's a particular vertical that they're in. I think they are, I wouldn't say equally distributed, but I think they are distributed across every kind of vertical you can imagine.
No, I think you're right there, David, on your numbers. And I also, I'm kind of proud of the fact that it does span a broad number of industries and verticals, because I think it proves how the diversity of technology applies so well to so many different industries. But you're spot on. I wouldn't change a thing.
Okay. Next question here. What's the biggest benefit of using S3 over NFS for backup data? Just to reiterate, I think, because of the fact that we can just write at the application layer, we can drive more concurrency. I think personally, the simplicity angle. So, the ability just to have that single S3 bucket set up, there's no complicated networking you really have to think about. David talked about the security aspect. And I actually, I really like Commvault's cloud accelerator architecture. So the ability to leverage S3 there, I think is a really interesting and very, very useful use case. So I would sort of go across those four advantages.
Yeah, I think the performance stands out for me, but they're all good angles depending on what's important to you. But, if you asked me 3 years ago that S3 was going to be more performant than NFS, I wouldn't have believed you. But the boys in the lab figured it out. So it's good to see.
Nice. Well, it looks like we've reached the top of the hour. Before we go, I want to announce the winner. The Amazon $300 gift card is going to Judd Nissen from California. Congratulations, Judd Nissen from California. I want to thank Pure Storage and Commvault. Thank you so much, David and David. Excellent presentation today.
Thank you all. Thanks everyone for joining.
Appreciate the attention.
And thank you to our audience for joining us on today's webinar. For more information, check out the handout that's available there in the audience console on achieving greater protection against ransomware with the Commvault and Pure Storage solution. Thanks everyone for joining. We'll see you next time. Have a great day.